Once there was a river, deep and wet and winding. And for centuries, the river whispered promises to the world. Promises of incredible things that it would one day bring. Just as the earth had begun to wonder whether the river whispered false or true, the winding blue indeed did deliver a crazy, wonderful thing. A gift of indescribable power. It floated the promised gift downstream on an easy flow. Wrapped tight inside a blanket of moss, nestled in a hollowed-out tree log. Cradle and boat for the creature within. Curious as to what the long-awaited gift may be, the earth was straining fit to burst through its very rocks and mountains, until finally it caught hold of the moss-lined bark as it rounded a deep curve in the river's meander, causing it to stay lodged for just long enough that a two-legged, 10-toed tiny child could muddle its way to the shore. The child inside was beautiful, and this is perhaps the only thing we can truly know in this story we tell. Amongst the details lost tangled up in time is whether this child was a boy or a girl, and it hardly matters now. But for the sake of the telling of it, let us call this wonder a girl. And the girl tumbled unknowing from the water's edge into a clump of sweet green grass and slept. While she slept, a cat-like creature stood guard at her tiny feet. For the cat understood that the girl's magical ways alone would never be enough to keep her safe on the earth. Loved, yes. Secure in the heavens, yes. But the earth is a masterful teacher and cannot make exceptions, even for such star-born souls. When the girl rose with her first dawn, she really believed that the very warmth and light from the sun came directly from the keen excitement she felt inside her belly. And from that time on, she would start each early morning, not with a sigh or with a sleepy groan, but with a swift intake of air. A gasp to the thrill of the bird song, to the mouse scamper and the wind rushing past as if late for setting up the day. Soon enough, every day the same, out from the little girl's gasp would unwind a conquering smile, a smile so big that the watching creatures wondered if they might bask the whole morning in its brightness. And out from the smile came a sound. Every new morning the same sound. Yes, yes. And on she would run and clamber and glide over and around every toy that the earth had provided. Until one day, for no reason that she could rightly tell, she ate more berries than her usual lot, and did some similar not much things, and suddenly, within the time it took for a dog to jump and land again, a brand new feeling ached inside her. A strange feeling. A feeling of hunger in spite of her overfill of berries. An empty stirring of nothing. And she looked about in panic for an anything with which to fill the gaping holes that seemed to be tearing inside her with every moment. And yet on the earth and the animals played, on the river flowed, and on the sky burned blue, as if failing to notice her deep, new pain. That terrible day, the girl was to dance a brand new dance. A wild and troubling thing, hoping to fix the parts, to heal them back to something worthy of the yesness she had offered when the days were so young. What, she asked, is this? I am not supposed to be here, the girl decided. I am not supposed to be. Her tiny kingdom, Her piece of the earth was suddenly seeped in a wrongness she had never known before now. On her way to say goodbye to the stretch of river she'd played in so often, she peered at the surface of the water and saw a distorted face and body staring back, and decided it was ugly and bad. She thought about how she had stayed in this single place for so long, and how thin was her bed of grass and leaves, how small the shell she'd used from which to drink, and decided it was shabby and poor. She now felt nothing of the wind or the sun, although they raced and shone as much as ever they had. She felt nothing of the rain as it patted her fondly on the head, nor of the sand as it hugged between her feet. For the first time in this life, she felt alone. And so, my friend, it was that the girl set out to find her missing pieces, to build herself back to her greatness. You may be surprised to hear that the river did not cry, although that is what rivers are supposed by many to do. For the river knew that the child would one day return. At least, it hoped she would one day return. The girl creature walked for so many days and nights that a nut she'd left behind grew into a tree, one strong enough to carry a nest. But she never looked back to see this tree. For years she pushed down proven paths and deeply ridged tracks, eventually leaving the obvious ways to wander through harder places, places where the stone cut into her hands, where the earth gave little support, and threw her many lessons. But along her path her breath deepened. Her muscles grew and stretched until soon she was twice the size of herself. And along that same path she met women, men and children. People creatures just like her, and yet not like her. Some taller, some shorter. They came in every shade of wonder. She remembered back to the conversations she'd always enjoyed with the birds and fish and crawling creatures, and with those voices that descended when the sun went to bed. She recalled how it hadn't mattered before, that each had had its own peculiar word song. However, now she yearned to be spoken back to in her own tongue, to know that she was maybe understood. So these fresh-sprung people thrilled her to her deepest core. The people held her hands and her face and spoke with her in her own same words, as she learned new sayings with them, sayings that conjured great possibilities. And she built her body strong, and she worked her mind hard, and she keenly felt the makings and creatings all around. As these days passed, she learned to visit new lands without having to move, through the colourful tales brought to her by the walking people, told and retold until they became a part of her own story too. They built themselves homes of mud, with the help from the water dug from the depths, and from sun's rays from the highest of highs, and they lived there happily, and sometimes less happily, and that was fine too. And soon she began to feel the spaces inside her close and comfort themselves, and she was pleased that she had ventured to this superior place. Even the wind and the sun and the earth seemed to be her brothers and sisters once more. And again, she felt a fondness for herself. She stayed in this magical and difficult place for longer than she ever thought a lifetime could contain. Am I not complete? She would ask herself. One day she looked down at her bronzed limbs, lean and strong, now built for speed and service. As she rolled and leaped and flew, her body shook and danced with the joy she was feeling once again. She gazed long and deep at the pictures she had painted and the written words she had smartly captured for all time, and her heart swelled with it, and a glorious song came to her knowing mouth. She was proud of these things, and a part of her longed once more to return to her childhood kingdom, to display for each animal all she had achieved. But again, she was not her primary mistress. Stirring inside her was a new and gradual sensation. Not an emptiness as before, but a pulling, a soft calling, enticing her to more. And in that moment, she understood that as great as all this was, it would never be enough. And the woman, for this is what she had now grown to be, said a bittersweet farewell to the people she had come to love, and packed a bag of the lightest and most precious things to accompany her on her next adventure into the blinding unknown. In that very moment, her beloved river could feel her shift again, and the river smiled, knowing this to be her only possible path home. As the woman set out, a storm set in. It was dark and heavy and creeping. It started with a growling of the crawling creatures, a low discontent in the elements and ground. Next came a howling and stabbing of the wind, joined by a breaking of branches and trees. A relentless rain began to beat, such as the woman had thought might exist, but never expected might fall. And she chose to continue along the bitter ash paths ahead. For what else was there to be done? And on the dark rain fell through many nights, until, just when it began to feel like something that might sadly be bearable forever, it began to beat harder again. As if led by the pain of the ages, a great and terrible implosion rent apart the skies, and all went suddenly quiet. A death note of silence played long and deep in the fields around, and punctured her heart to its major vein, causing her to bleed the very blackness of it all. To die without dying. What a curious hell. And she wished she had never left the bright blue of the river and its sweet, sweet cradle song. All this for nothing. All this to venture just to finish unfinished in the road alone. And she sat with the darkness. But what more could she do? She rocked it gently in her arms. She kissed it with her broken mouth, and sang to it a song of small enough hope that it just might slip through to the core. Her eyes went missing, and she further bled. Throughout all this, the woman's history stood its simple guard, narrating copious tales of remember when to this creature and her endless night, and breathed future tales of comfort during moments when the threads of faith hovered far too thinly to survive. Until one day, for no reason other than that things must change, the starless, endless night began to fade, and instead came a careful glow, a steady and powerful light. Not just a brightness such as cast by the sun, but a deeper magic by far. This was a sense of pure elevation, of being held for all time through all seasons. What once was a thirst was now slaked in grace, washed deep in such delicious knowing. And she understood that just as the dew must kiss the morning grasses, just as blossoms must open, just as the fallen stone must land, just as the egg must one day fly, so must she triumph at last. And in that moment she understood that everything sent was sent to serve her well. And every cell of her grew richer, and her mind and heart expanded beyond all earthly expectation. And she now understood that the magic was inside her too, was of her, was her, that she was made of this endless perfection too. Imagining back to her very first little bed of grass and tiny leaves, to her first friend the river, to her first adversary the open road, it all seemed like something unreal, like the strange things that visit when your fever is high. She thought of the places she had helped to build, of the people who lived there, and it seemed even stranger still. Although the rain no longer beat, and her heart was now dancing to its own sound, and her limbs were now pure power, she decided to remain right where she was. She closed her eyes and opened them. Perhaps a moment later, or perhaps it was a year. And looking carefully around, she saw with ease that everything from her earlier days had joined her right here. Each rabbit, ant, cat, antelope and tree. Each person, each brick, each book of wisdom. Every laugh she had ever laughed, and those that she would laugh later on someday. Even her future joined her, with merely a lightest of silk covering its form. The beloved people held her heart and she theirs, and the animals rested in her hands. The sun shone brightly upon her, and she shone more brightly back again. And the breezes now passed through her, carrying her to every part of existence. And together they were all and everything. And the fight was not so much over. Rather, it had simply ceased to be. And slowly, slowly, or was time just a game? The river parted the earth and softly found its way to where its best of creatures now played. And she knew her body to be an honorable vessel for this larger power. She knew her mind and heart to be part of a limitless, greater mind and heart. She knew that the gentle force of all that was, and all that would ever be, was part of her, and to be used through her. And she crowned this great power with the title of love. And what was left was a new beginning for the best of all beings, for everyone, for all. And if you keep still, you can sometimes hear the river softly whisper, promising great things, telling the story, reminding whoever cares to listen, singing, "You are the glory, and the glory is you." It's so very true, my lovely friend. For you are the glory, you are the love, and the river softly sings.